Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to unpack a whole stack of information and really get to the heart of what you need to know.
That's the plan.
Today we're plunging into something really personal, a choice many people are wrestling with, family planning. Especially now when life paths are so varied and, let's face it, pretty unpredictable.
Absolutely. And our deep dive today focuses specifically on egg freezing. We're looking at the unique angles, the complexities, particularly for women in Singapore.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? The whole thing kicked off recently with the Singapore government announcement. They extended the age limit for elective egg freezing. Used to be 35, now it's 37.
Right. Seems like a simple change on the surface. More choice.
Exactly what I thought. But then almost straight away, you had sources like the Straits Times piping up, questioning if elective freezing is even necessary or, effective. They were citing research that really makes you pause.
It's fascinating how quickly that public chat shifted, from just a policy tweak to this much deeper, almost uncomfortable debate.
Totally. So that's our mission today. We want to peel back the layers of this decision. It's not just about choice. Is egg freezing really this empowering fix it's made out to be?
Or does it maybe open up a kind of Pandora's box? Unforeseen challenges, especially in a place like Singapore, with its own unique cultural context.
That's it. We want to give you, our listeners, a really comprehensive, nuanced picture that goes way beyond just the headlines.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe by tackling a big assumption.
Yeah.
About why women freeze their eggs.
Good idea. Because the common story, the one you always hear, is that it's mostly about delaying things deliberately, for a career climb or wanting to travel lows.
Forget the lifestyle narrative. But sociological studies, they paint a very different picture. Quite surprising, actually.
Okay, spill the beans. What's the real dominant reason the research points to?
Well, forget the corner office. The biggest factor isn't career ambition. Our research shows, overwhelmingly, that women freeze their eggs because they just haven't found the right partner to have kids with.
Wow. Not because they don't want kids, but because the partner isn't there.
Exactly. That's a huge societal point. Of course, other reasons pop up too. Not feeling emotionally ready or financially stable enough for motherhood. Those are definitely there as well.
That completely reframes it, doesn't it? So if finding Mr. or Miss Right is the main issue, let's talk about this mating gap. Professor Marcy Inhorn at Yale wrote about it in her 2023 book, Motherhood on Ice.
Yeah, she did. She points out that in most countries, way more women are graduating from university than men.
And how does that play out in Singapore? Is it the same story?
Absolutely. Singapore is a perfect example. The Department of Statistics back in 2021 showed 64% of women aged 25-34 had a degree.
Okay.
Compared to just 56% of men in that same age group.
That's quite a gap.
It really is. Think about what that imbalance does for finding a partner who feels, compatible. This mating gap is expected to push more young women in Singapore towards egg freezing.
Why? What's the thinking there?
Well, it basically gives them more breathing room, more time to find someone suitable, and hopefully avoid what some people call panic partnering.
Panic partnering, yeah, I've heard that. What exactly does that mean in this context?
It's that feeling, right? The biological clock is ticking loud, and you feel pressured to settle, to just pick someone, maybe not the ideal person, rush into a relationship, maybe even marriage, just to have kids before you feel it's, too late.
That sounds stressful.
It is. And egg freezing, at least in theory, gives you a bit of a shield against that pressure. It buys you time.
So it's less about climbing the corporate ladder and more about navigating the dating ladder, in a way.
In many cases, yes. Which brings us to some really deep-seated cultural stuff. Things like female hypergamy and this idea of loss of face.
Okay, break those down for us, especially in the Singapore context. Hypergamy first.
Right, hypergamy.
Yeah.
It's this tendency, often seen in women, to look for partners who have sort of more, maybe richer, smarter, taller, higher status. It's not just a modern thing. It's pretty deeply rooted culturally, maybe even genetically, some argue.
And in Singapore?
Well, in a place like Singapore, super competitive, Confucian roots, quite conscious of social standing or face, this isn't just a private preference. It has real social weight.
How so?
Marrying down, so choosing a partner with less income or maybe lower educational qualifications, it isn't just about the money or the degree. It can lead to a serious loss of face, diolescent, as they say, for the woman and for her whole family.
Wow, that's a huge cultural pressure, loss of face. Do you think that honestly shapes these decisions more than, say, government policy?
I think it's immense, yeah. The pressure to fit in, especially in these shame-based cultures, can be like this invisible hand guiding really personal choices.
Makes sense.
And you can even look at it from an evolutionary biology angle, right? Women carry the huge physical and emotional load of pregnancy, birth, childcare. So naturally, they're often looking for a partner who can help ensure a good quality of life. Resources, good genes.
So income, status, education, they're not just random preferences. They become key factors in finding someone to raise kids with.
Exactly. They become pretty central considerations.
Okay, that really clarifies the why. But the story gets even more tangled after the eggs are frozen, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The journey is often far from over. There can be unexpected dilemmas, regret even, and some very specific legal hurdles, especially in Singapore.
Yeah, I read this statistic that seemed kind of shocking that most women who freeze their eggs, they don't actually end up using them. Is that right?
It is right, yeah. Research from other countries shows that pretty consistently. The majority are never thawed and used.
Huh.
And add to that, a 2018 U.S. study looked at about 500 women, found roughly half of them later regretted the decision to freeze in the first place.
Regret. That's surprising. You think of it as creating options, being empowering. Why the regret? And how does Singapore's law, especially for single women, factor in?
This is absolutely critical for women in Singapore to understand. The law is crystal clear. Only legally married women can use their frozen eggs here.
Only married women.
Yes. IVF for single women, banned. Same-sex couples,
Yeah.
banned. And unlike places in the West, just living together, a de facto relationship that's not recognized legally in Singapore either.
So if the reason you froze finding Mr. Right, say, it just doesn't happen.
And you're left with this big what if. What do you do with the eggs?
Okay, so what are the options then? Practically speaking, for these unused eggs, and what are the sort of psychological implications?
You basically have 4 paths. 1, destruction. 2, donate them to another woman who needs eggs. 3, donate them for scientific research. Or 4, single motherhood by exporting the eggs overseas, getting IVF with donor sperm somewhere else.
Okay, let's pause on the first 3. Destruction, donation. What does that mean for the woman?
It means that whole investment, the cost of the procedure itself, which isn't cheap, plus the annual storage fees, was, effectively wasted in financial terms.
Yeah.
It's really important to think about these possibilities before starting. They carry emotional weight too.
And donating to another woman.
That comes with its own complex psychosocial stuff to unpack. Definitely not a simple decision.
So it's not just freeze and forget. You need a plan for potential non-use. And speaking of planning, how long should you keep eggs stored? Is there a point where it's just not practical anymore?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should you wait until motherhood feels, well, maybe not desirable anymore, or just not practical?
Like what?
Like maybe your remaining lifespan isn't really long enough to raise a child to independence. Or you find, realistically, you just won't have the energy physically, emotionally, to cope with raising a young child when you're much older.
These are really tough practical things people might not think about initially.
They often get overlooked, in the sort of excitement of having an option.
Okay, this leads us nicely into that 4th option you mentioned, the really big one. Single motherhood by choice, using the overseas route.
Right.
So the door is shut for single women using donor sperm IVF in Singapore, but there's a loophole.
Kind of, yeah. While Singapore bans it domestically, there aren't currently any rules stopping single women from shipping their frozen eggs out to places like Australia or the U.S.
And clinics there will do the IVF?
Yes, those clinics often routinely perform sperm donor IVF for single women. So it creates this, legal workaround that some women are definitely looking into.
My body, my choice. That's
Yeah.
a slogan we hear a lot,
Yeah.
right? And it fits here. But you're saying this choice, this specific one, has some really big consequences attached.
Absolutely. It feels empowering, sure, but it comes with huge responsibilities and consequences.
Yeah.
Not just for the woman, but for the child she might have, for her family, her loved ones. It's not a decision made in a vacuum. Not at all.
And the legal situation in Singapore for unmarried mothers.
Yeah.
It's quite different, isn't it? With serious implications.
It really is. Singapore law draws a very sharp line. There are legitimate children, those whose mothers are divorced or widowed single moms, and then there are illegitimate children, those born to unmarried mothers.
Illegitimate. That sounds harsh.
It is, and the discrimination is real. Illegitimate children miss out on a whole raft of government pro-family benefits. Things like public housing subsidies, tax rebates, the cash gifts for newborns. All that stuff is reserved for married, heterosexual couples.
Wow. That's a huge financial hit right there. It really shows how society's structures are set up, beyond just personal choice. What about basic things like inheritance?
That's another key point. Sperm donor conceived children of single mothers, they're legally illegitimate. They don't have automatic rights to inherit from their single parent's estate if she dies without a will.
Seriously.
Yes, they get citizenship automatically, sure. But the state basically sends a clear message. Being born outside a heterosexual marriage comes with significant systemic disadvantages.
Okay, moving beyond the law. What about the day-to-day realities? The financial, emotional, physical side of single motherhood by choice. It sounds incredibly demanding.
It paints a very stark picture, yeah.
Now,
Unless you're quite wealthy and have a really strong, supportive family backing you up, it's incredibly challenging. Financially, emotionally, physically.
how so financially?
Well, think about divorced single moms or women who had accidental pregnancies.
Yeah.
They might get child support, right? But for single mothers, by choice, using donor sperm, all the costs, 100% on them.
Right, no co-parent contributing.
Exactly. And you're juggling earning a living with childcare. That's exhausting, physically and emotionally.
Which makes family support absolutely vital, I guess.
Crucial. And if your parents, your family, don't approve of your choice, which is quite possible in a conservative setting,
Then you might get zero help. No childcare, no financial top-ups.
pretty much. Compare that to married couples who often have help from both spouses and maybe in-laws. You might end up needing expensive nannies or full-time childcare centers. So you need serious savings before you even start down this path.
Okay, and what about the child in all this? Are there potential negative effects psychosocially, especially growing up in Singapore?
That's a really important, sensitive question. Singapore is, still a pretty conservative, patriarchal Asian society. Single motherhood carries a heavy stigma.
How might that play out for a child?
Well, imagine being a kid. Most of your classmates have two parents at home, or at least involved. You only have a mom. How does that feel?
Yeah.
And kids whose parents are divorced, or maybe born out of wedlock but the father is known, they often know who their biological dad is. Donor-conceived kids, they usually have this total blank space where their biological father should be.
Yeah.
That can raise really complex identity issues down the line.
That's tough. Is there research on outcomes?
Yes, sociological studies pretty consistently show that kids raised in stable, conventional two-parent homes tend to do better academically, on average, and have fewer behavioral issues. It's not deterministic, of course, but it's a pattern.
So it's not just the mother's choice impacting her, but the child's experience within a specific social context? Could it cause friction within the wider family too?
Oh, absolutely. There's a really disturbing possibility that the woman and her child could face scorn, even ridicule, from extended family members because of the stigma around illegitimacy and single motherhood in many traditional Asian families.
That's a heavy burden.
It is, for both of them. Plus, think about the single mom working crazy hours just to make ends meet. The limited time she might have for her child could potentially lead to difficulties in their relationship later on, too. Another layer of challenge.
And what if the mother still hopes to find a partner someday? Does being an unwed mother with an illegitimate child affect her dating prospects in Singapore?
It definitely can. In Singapore's conservative social scene, it can be seen as a significant liability. It could really reduce your perceived value on the dating and marriage market if finding a partner is still something you want. It just adds another hurdle.
Okay, one more specific group. Mixed-race children conceived this way. You mentioned a trend of Asian women using Caucasian sperm donors overseas.
Yes, that seems to be happening more, maybe influenced by Western media, beauty standards, who knows?
Are there potential issues there in Singapore specifically?
There could be, yeah. These illegitimate mixed-race children might struggle to fit in with their extended family, maybe in wider society too, because of conservative views, maybe even underlying racial biases or stratification in Singapore.
How is that different from kids of, say, a legitimate mixed-race marriage?
Well, those kids usually have guidance from parents rooted in both cultures. An illegitimate Eurasian child, raised only by an Asian single mother, might really stick out like a sore thumb, as the saying goes. They could face real difficulties fitting in at school, especially if it's mostly Asian kids.
Wow, so many unexpected social layers to navigate. But the potential problems don't even stop there, do they? What about things going wrong with the sperm banks themselves? Scandals? Mishaps? That sounds pretty alarming.
It does sound alarming, but these are real cases that hit the news. They really highlight the risks in this sort of booming fertility industry.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, there was the case of Christopher Agilis.
Yeah.
He was an ex-criminal, had schizophrenia, lied about having a PhD, and apparently fathered 36 children through sperm donation before it came out.
Oh my God.
Then there was Jennifer Cramblett, a white woman who mistakenly received sperm from a black donor. A huge mix-up.
Right, I remember hearing about that one.
And another case, Danielle Rizzo, a single mother who ended up having 2 sons with autism, conceived using sperm from a donor who, it turned out, also had autism. She sued the sperm bank.
Wow. Those are massive risks, things you just wouldn't want to imagine when making such a big decision. It really does sound like a cautionary tale.
It does.
And just the practicalities moving the eggs. Does exporting them affect the chances of IVF working later?
It absolutely can, yes. There's a real risk of lower success rates because the freezing process used by one lab might not be perfectly compatible with the thawing process used by another lab overseas.
How does that work?
It's often described like a lock and a key. Human eggs are incredibly delicate. The thawing technique has to perfectly match the freezing technique used initially. So ideally, you'd use the same lab for both freezing and thawing, if possible.
That makes sense. And the actual shipping, getting them from A to B, is that risky too?
It carries a risk, yes. It might be remote, but it's there. Damage during transport can happen. Think about unforeseen delays, accidents, maybe temperature changes if equipment malfunctions. Any of that could seriously harm the eggs and drastically lower the chances of success.
These are complex logistics people might not even consider when they first think about freezing.
Exactly. They might not be fully aware of these downstream technical issues.
Okay, so let's try and pull all these threads together. What's the big takeaway here for someone considering this in Singapore? It really does sound like, as you put it earlier, a can of worms.
It absolutely is. I think what this deep dive really shows is that egg freezing for women in Singapore is just not a simple, straightforward personal choice. It truly is a can of worms.
Yeah.
It potentially opens up this whole range of complicated personal issues, societal pressures, legal roadblocks, even logistical headaches that maybe we don't think about enough up front. It's much more complex than just buying time.
Which leads back to that idea you mentioned, serious soul searching is in order.
Exactly. Before you jump in, you really need to do that deep thinking. Understand the full picture, the challenges, the potential downsides, not just the shiny benefit of having the option. It's about having real foresight, being honest with yourself.
And maybe as a final thought, something for you, our listeners, to chew on. Really reflect on that tension, the tension between what society expects, have kids, maybe get married first, versus what you truly want, or maybe don't want, regarding motherhood.
Yeah, ask yourself, do I genuinely want children? Or am I maybe just reacting to pressure from family, from society?
And really consider those practical emotional costs we talked about, trying to navigate these super personal choices within the legal and cultural reality of Singapore. It's not just about what you can do.
It's about what you truly want to do and what the full, complex, sometimes messy implications of that choice might actually be for you and potentially for a future child.